fresh.
Hello, everyone.
Yo, we're back. Finally, good tap dancing. God, like
Dude, it was
I've
1,000 years. It was an eon of
we were in the
dryness.
desert. We were
No
like
fate.
Moses. We were like
No
Moses.
fate.
We were just walking through the desert on nothing but
know-
faith or
Ooh.
nothing but fate. I don't know. One of the two.
Okay.
Something's there.
I'm thinking of The Lion King after Simba's exile when he's in the desert and just the earth is cracked.
That's how it's felt. That's how it's felt.
No fate, boys, to water the lawn.
Oh goodness. Oh, it feels so good to be back. I love this cast. I love this cast. I know we're still growing it, and hopefully people who are tuning in are getting as much value from it as we are doing it.
Yeah.
But
we're just having fun together. Ian and I just being homies, enjoying each other's company, enjoying each other's conversation. And I love that even when Chris decided to take a hiatus, love you, Chris. It's just good to keep the step and just keep our conversations going.
Yes. And so if you are watching this with video, you will notice that Patrick and I are not in the same place for the first time. So this is the first Fate Boys cast that we're doing fully remote. So I'm in the studio, Patrick's in his studio, and we are recording independently. He's in Boulder, I'm in Berthoud. And if this works out, we might be able to coerce Chris back in. I don't know to see, because all he has to do is just hop on a mic, you know.
And he ain't working every night.
I know he's got time.
We're throwing shade, Chris. You just gotta let us. Just let it happen. Just let it happen.
He'll figure it out. And he messaged me the other day, and he was just like, "Hey, I would love to come back and guest spot." And we're like, "Dude, that was always
we would love that.
That's the move.
Preach.
Like whenever you're available, let us know. We'll get you on the books." And obviously more guests to come. Very excited about all the people who we have in the pipeline.
I'm still holding out for next Dune cast.
I know. Well, I've been meaning to reach out to Max because he's like Captain Dune. So I'm wanting to
beard. It's that simple.
I know. Yeah, he's awesome. We need to get him back in here. So we'll get him back in here. We'll get some new people, new fresh blood. We need to get Josh back. We need to get Eden back on the cast. We need to get.
We'll get so many people one day.
Pamela. We need to get Cassie. We need to get all the people. All the people. Speaking of just some hot goss before we get into it.
I'm so teased right now. What do you got?
Officially. So you know that we had some friends coming to stay with us for the last like week or so, and that they just drove back. I heard through the grapevine that someone's moving here.
They picked Colorado.
They picked CO.
That's fun. That's super fun.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, we knew it was going to happen, but
I mentioned that because they're awesome and also would be amazing to have on the cast.
It'd be so fun.
So good. He's such a storyteller. He can just go for days. So it's like, it would be awesome to get him on here and just like let him spin yarns. Yeah. Pick a topic and let him roll, because it would be really fantastic to hear his take on things. Cool. So anything else you want to go over before we jump into the jar of fate?
Yeah, just I'm grateful to everyone who chooses to lend their ear to us just having our authentic conversations together. We're just having fun right now, and I know that Ian and I have the intent of doing this more regularly and just providing more value as we find our groove together and bringing more and more of our deeper life experiences to the podcast. So I'm just voicing that and putting it on the table.
Hell yeah. And I also like I will definitely, if and when this pops off and we are just like,
oh, it will. It's just
we're rolling, right? All you 17 people who continuously listen, we know you on a first name basis. Trust and believe you will be getting
the first ones to get a t-shirt.
Exactly. You'll be getting all the swag. You'll be getting all the hookups. And we're going to be doing giveaways and stuff like that as things progress.
Oh, so much
as
potential.
Well. It's going to be so much fun. Oh my God. I know.
So much potential.
Okay. So without further ado.
All right, Ian, you know how to reel us in.
The Jar of Fate. And we're going to have to get one for you also, Patrick. So that way we can alternate back and forth.
Good idea.
And they won't be the same jar. So it's even like more mysterious. Like you'll have some, I'll have some. we'll just have a mystery jar out in the world that someone, whoever their guest, like picks from, we'll send them like a package, like a FedEx package, just with slips of paper
Oh
for
my
them to
God.
pick one
No,
from.
how about this? Our first giveaway to our most loyal fans is going
Uh
to be ASMR of Ian just ruffling his hand through the jar.
huh. I mean, honestly, we could do that for an hour and we'd probably make more money. All right, let us see. What do we have? What do we have? Oh,
Oh,
Snapdragon.
oh,
Oh, it's a good one, Patrick.
oh.
Oh, snap. I'm
Monarchy.
gonna
No, I'm kidding.
I don't think you're ready. I don't think you're ready for this jelly, but boundaries.
It's not relevant at all. At
I
all.
know, right?
Never heard of them.
What are you talking about?
Who needs
That's
them?
not something that you're dealing with right now. I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's not top of mind. It's not in focus. Never heard of her.
Boundaries. Ooh, ooh. Mm.
Okay.
That's a tasty dish.
All
Okay,
right.
boundaries.
Okay. I'm here we go.
Go
Ian,
in.
when do you know, beyond all doubt, you don't even have to think about it, that a boundary needs to be set on your side?
Uh, first reaction that I get is it's physical.
Hmm.
You get a sinking feeling, kind of like when you're a kid and you lie. Like before, if you're like a pathological liar, like, and that's a learned trait, you don't really notice it anymore. But when you're little and you know you're not telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a sinking feeling in your tummy that just feels like unsettled, and it
Yeah.
just like doesn't feel right. It doesn't sit right with you.
You know you're not listening to Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah. And so for me, when someone is overstepping a boundary, when you are aware of what your self is, because I think also part of that is you have to have an awareness of the edge to know that it's been crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are one who knows and has a good sense of what you will tolerate and what is acceptable behavior in regards to you, whether that's lateness or if how people speak to you
Mm-hmm.
or if
You
they
said
return text
lateness,
messages. Lateness, like
lateness,
I had a
tardiness.
friend who called me out on it, and it was very loving. I don't run late. I'm typically on time. And for me, when I was coming up as a young buck, the model that was set for me was uh, 10 minutes early is on
On
time,
time.
and
Mm-hmm.
on time is late.
Yeah.
So basically, you're showing up to be there, to be ready at the time that you said you were going to be there, whatever it is. If it's a dentist appointment, meeting up with friends, going to an interview, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was 10 minutes ahead. 10 to 15 minutes ahead is on time. On time is late. Late is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not somebody who is often late, but occasionally I will be. I'll be like 5, 10. I'm never like 30 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that disrespectful to people who have been waiting around. A time has been set that said like 4 p.m. and someone rolls through at 5 and doesn't even mention it. I know some of those people, drives me up a wall. I don't want to interact with them professionally and sometimes even like just personally because it just reeks of such disrespect. But I'll occasionally be like 5 to 10 minutes late. And so it happened 2 times back to back with a friend of mine. I was like I was running out the door. Things were, taking longer than expected. And I was about like 5 to 10 minutes late. And I texted him both times. And I said, "Hey, I'm running 5 to 10. I'll be there soon." And on the second time when I showed up, he kind of took me aside and said like, "Hey, I just really want to say something that it's really important to me that you honor the time that you're showing up. It's like I have a business, I have a kid, like I'm taking time very intentionally. My free time is not it comes at a cost basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels wildly disrespectful even though I know you don't mean it to be. I know that that's not your intention. And younger me would have gotten pissed at that.
Mm.
And honestly, what he was doing was setting a very clear boundary.
Yeah.
It was saying, "Hey, first time, mistakes happen. Second time, now it's turning into a pattern and I should probably address it." And then
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes people have like a 3 strike kind of scenario. It's like 1, 2, and then 3, you say something. But he felt it worthy to like nip it in the bud and say
Yeah.
like, "Hey, this is an issue for me." He wasn't talking down to me. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't trying to degrade me or make me feel worthless or less than. He was literally just saying, hey, for me, my time, this is like really important for me, and I would really appreciate it if you could try more to like
Yeah.
honor that. And I
Mhm.
heard the request, and it was
Mhm.
really like, and guess what? I'm never late when I go and hang out with him. You know, anytime
And
we like,
because
I
your friend is so
intentionally
reasonable, it makes it
it
that much more of your inclination to want to meet that boundary, right?
right. Well, I think that's a perfect example of how to model healthy boundaries,
Hmm.
because there's also a fine line, and I'm sure we'll go into this for sure. Excuse me, between people who just want to impose their will onto everybody. And it could be really easily mistaken for setting a boundary when really that is a preference that you have that not everybody needs to adhere to.
Uh-huh.
And just because you have a way of doing things in the world and that you want to see the world in a certain way doesn't mean or behold everyone else to operate that way.
Hmm.
That's very different than, hey, I was stepped on and I really don't want to get stepped on again. So can we come up with a situation where I don't get stepped on? And that's a vastly
Yeah.
different orientation, but it's very easy, especially for people who are egotistical or narcissistic, to not understand boundaries. Oh, narcissists are the worst
Hmm.
with boundaries, because anytime that you try to instill a boundary, they see that as a threat, and they
Yeah.
immediately try to deny, subvert, and project
Test
all
it
of that
and
back onto you if it like make you feel like you're crazy.
mm. I'm thinking back to the example you brought up with your friend, and I'm just imagining how that whole experience would have been different for you both, but especially you on the receiving end of that. Had your friend not said anything, but you just felt it on him that he was irritated.
That is a really good point. And I'll pose that back to you as a question.
Give it back
um,
to
Patrick, have you ever
me.
uh, have you ever wanted to say something but didn't, and why didn't you?
So many times, Ian. So many times it's like I feel deep regret around this topic actually because I feel like only in real time right now am I learning where my boundaries are, where that edge is, and when I feel it in my body. And it's not always overt for me. Ooh, sorry. Like
The mood shifted
one sec.
greatly right there. That was great.
I wasn't
There you
done.
go.
Okay. I'm recognizing
Looking like
that
Robert Pattinson from Twilight.
the skin of a killer, Bella. Ooh. I let's
Sorry.
see. No, no, no.
Continue.
I'm sorry. I am learning that my body does send me signals when something needs to be said, a boundary needs to be placed in order for the relationship to come to a place of safety, if that's at all possible. And because I am learning for the first time in my life how to actually pay attention to those bodily somatic signals, I miss them so much. And by the time it gets dire and my body just like, puts a wall up, or I dissociate, or I get angry after the fact, that happens to me all the time. I'll feel the anger after the fact and it can't be ignored at that point. So most of the time, I don't place the boundary because I'm just not paying close and slow enough attention to my embodied experience in the moment.
Mm,
And it catches up with me later and I'm angry, but because the moment is past, the anger has nowhere to go but back onto me. So it
mm.
just really demands a lot of my reflection, when that happens.
So the second part of that question is, why don't you?
Yeah. I My immediate reflection on that is because I'm not, when I need to set a boundary these days, it's not the stranger on the street who like wants to steal my money or take advantage of me in the workplace or
Those are so easy
yeah, that's
because they're not
simple.
they're not a, what they refer to as a high stake relationship.
Totally. It's in those high stakes relationship where all of the sudden, we're talking and all of a sudden I'm receiving some kind of feedback that I'm not really like emotionally prepared to receive, or there's no like prior conversation beforehand on whether I'm ready to have that kind of um, conversation, be it a conflict or just constructive criticism or whatever it is.
Sure.
And if I'm not checking in with myself, and all of a sudden I'm just receiving some criticism, I'll just like take it because genuinely I want to learn how to be better, how to be more me,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm fortunate in this life to have people around me that want that of me too. So I'm never really expecting to need to set a boundary when I'm in those situations. And these days I'm learning how to just pay closer attention to myself and the situations that I choose to be in, so that if I'm in a place of really good presence and self acceptance, I want to believe that my bodily signals will be more clear when it's time for me to, like, hey, not in the mood to have this conversation. Like, let's, yeah.
Yeah. So I think kind of what you brought up there, and I don't know if I got a clear answer. I
I
kind of
was,
felt like there was a lot of descriptions around like how you felt
mm-hmm.
necessarily, but like if you could summarize that in like one statement as like a less than a sentence type of response, or like no is a complete sentence too.
Honestly, Ian,
um
I think I just miss it. I miss the cue that I
mm,
need to
and
set a
that's why you
boundary.
don't do it, is
Yeah.
because you feel
I
like you
think
missed the
I,
cue. Okay.
honestly, I think I just miss it.
No, that's a really good
Yeah.
answer. I don't think that you are alone in that, and I think I I'm trying to think back in a time period for myself when I was less practiced. I feel really grateful because I have been practicing this for fucking forever now.
You're kind of a Jedi at it, actually.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just in that I know what it feels like to be in those moments, and I know how to skillfully address them. And
Mm-hmm.
so kind of coming back to your first question about like how do you know when a boundary's been crossed? Because if your biggest hangup is the cue, most oftentimes it starts with a sensation. It starts with that like stomach gut punch, or
Mm.
like your face will start to flush, or something will just sit wrong with you.
I feel a
Um,
constriction in my
yeah,
heart.
or a tightness in your chest.
That's my
Sure.
that's like my default cue I'm
Mm,
recognizing.
that's good.
Yeah.
So the first step is to recognize that, like, oh, that's not sitting right with me. And oftentimes it's never the intent. Oftentimes it's never. Oftentimes it's not often the intent of the person who's doing it to
Mhm.
try to step on you. And so a really good pattern recognition is to first ask questions. And I need to find this video that I watched. It was from this like psychologist who was talking about like three things to negate pretty much all conflict and like stop it in its
Ooh.
tracks.
Ooh.
And one of the first ones was, hey, that didn't feel so great. Can you tell me really what you meant by that? Because asking back a
Mm.
question around what that
Bringing
person said
curiosity to it.
allows them to like kind of re-explore what it is that they said to you, with the full acknowledgement and understanding that it caused you to feel not so good.
Yeah.
So they might
Yeah.
say something about like, hey, that's a dumpy hoodie you're wearing or something, and you
Oof.
you just go like, that didn't feel so
Mm.
good.
I don't
Could
like
you
how
want to
that
you want to
landed.
under can I help me understand what you meant by that?
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, it's just really poofy. And it was just kind of like, oh, okay, because you
Oh.
chose the word frumpy, and to me that implied this, and it didn't really sit too great.
Yeah. It has an edge to
um
it.
and they're like, oh, no, 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 I didn't mean it. I'm like, oh, okay. Because you can walk back, I think, like 90% or 80% of the
Mhm.
majority of those types of oversteps,
In repair.
because most people are just so fucking unaware of their
Yeah.
impact on others and on themselves,
Yeah.
and they don't have it as malintent from jump. Right? It's very rare where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go say something fucked up
It's
to that
coming
person.
from ignorance.
Yeah, 100%. So
Yeah.
if you can acknowledge the feeling, right? Ooh, that didn't feel good. And to say, I need more information because I don't think that they were really trying to come for me.
Right.
Were you trying to come for me right there? And not to get like confrontational. That's why it's like, can you explain to me more
Yeah.
about what you meant? Because if I say those in that exact tone and those exact words, no part of that is like, hey, motherfucker. It's like, I didn't like your tone. Can you try that a different
Hey,
way?
if somebody said it like that, Ian, wouldn't it just be easier? Wouldn't it just be
Yeah.
easier, you know?
Yeah, it's like it's way obvious. It's the same thing like you're saying, like trying to get like jumped in the street. It's clear where the threat is, right?
Mhm.
But when it's coming from somebody who doesn't mean something, or maybe they did, but they didn't really know how to say it in a clean way. They didn't know how to really um, they didn't know how to really bring it up in a way that would have been met with more of a positive reaction. Or maybe you're dealing with somebody who is often so used to just being treated like trash that they don't have to feel like they have to curate what they say or how they say it at all,
Yeah.
you know, and they can just show up late and they can call them whatever they want and they can do whatever
There's
they
no
want in the
standard,
relationship because there's no respect, there's no boundary.
no bar.
And yeah, and then oftentimes what happens is the person who has been so conditioned to feeling that way, once they start to heal and start to establish healthy boundaries, the other person goes, you've changed,
Right.
you know, like, because they're so used to just like, hey, I've stepped on your neck for 10 years. Why are you just now having a problem with it? I'm like, well, it should have been a problem for me for 10 years, but it
Yep.
wasn't. And now it
The other
is.
person can't match the new maturity that's been
Hmm.
gained.
And so oftentimes a lot of those things break out from that. And it's like, okay, but if you can understand, the first step obviously is to know that you have something that's not sitting right. And
Mhm.
then the second step is to ask. And then the third step is to uh, really define what is the line for you in regards to that.
Right.
Honestly, it's kind of like negotiating with a toddler,
Within
because
yourself,
at that,
is that what you're saying?
no, with whomever you're dealing with the boundary, because it doesn't matter what you choose, the result is going to be X.
Mhm.
If you continue to, like, you do have a choice. Like, you can either walk upstairs to bed right now together and we can read a story, or I can carry you. But the result is you're going to bed. Like, there's no
Mhm.
option in that regard. And
Mhm.
what I mean by no option, I mean the boundary won't be crossed. Like, you won't tolerate it. The tolerance is done. Like, you're
Yeah.
done with the tolerance part. So when people are like, hey, you can either change your words to stop being so aggressive towards me right now, or if
Mhm.
you'd like to keep talking that way, I'll just leave. Which would you prefer to do? Would you like to continue this conversation in like a more neutral tone, or would you like me to leave? And then you put it into the context where you are defining, I will not be spoken to in that such a manner.
Mhm.
And if you would like to change how you're talking, I would love to continue this conversation. If you're done having this conversation and you just want to shit on me right now, I'm not here for that.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to go ahead and bounce.
Yeah.
And that's establishing like, hey, I'm wanting connection.
Right.
Like, and that's the fucking crazy thing about boundaries,
Yeah.
is that everyone has this misguided perception that boundaries create separation.
Or it's like a door slam every
Well,
time.
even like the name is like, I'm creating a boundary, like it's
Mhm.
the fucking Great Wall of China or something, you know?
Mhm.
I'm not
That
trying to
would be a really
create,
good boundary.
right? I'm not trying to create this to keep you out. I'm actually doing this for connection, because
Mhm.
what's happening is whatever is coming at me is causing me pain or duress or the icky things. And I don't want those things to happen to me. And that's why I wanted to make the delineation between self-imposed ickiness,
Mhm.
like the ones that you're causing. And so like you're coming into a space and you're requiring other people to bend to you for you to do those things, versus other things that people are doing either intentionally or not that are causing you those instances. And so you have to be aware of your culpability and your line, your own boundary, like
Mhm.
your internal boundary as it meets into your like metaphysical boundary. That's another way that we can spin this yarn too, Patrick, is
Ooh.
the
Ooh.
boundaries like
Yeah.
around us
Yeah.
and how we bounce off of each other. But that that is really where the line is drawn in the sand, and it's not drawn there for conflict. It's drawn there for connection.
Hmm. Mhm.
I'm not trying to tell you to stop cussing at me because I want to hurt you.
Yeah.
I'm telling you to stop cussing at me because I'm wanting us to be closer.
You want to
I'm
keep
not
having a conversation if that's possible.
right. I'm telling you, if you keep coming for me and being so hyper fucking critical, I can't engage with you in good conscience because
Mm.
all I'm going to feel is, um, what's the word? Uh, like self doubt and self
Yeah.
criticism, and feel like unsafe. Like you use the
Mm.
word safety.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to feel safe in the relationship, whether that's, like personal friendship or whatever. I mean, like when I say relationship, I mean the relationship of the person that you're talking
Mm-hmm.
with. Um, I'm not going to feel safe to just be. I'm going to have to like
Have a guard up.
walk, yeah, guard up, walk on eggshells, these types of things. And it's less about that. And it's more about establishing a pattern. So that way, and it's a two-way street. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing too, is it's like, hey, this is what I would really like. Is there anything I can do for you? Like,
That's a great point.
you know,
That's a great point. I'm glad you said that because I'm recognizing that, especially in the cases where someone is not trying to be malicious at all, they just didn't know where your boundary was.
right.
So they're just they're just you're tripping over yourself a little bit in their
You tripping,
company,
bro.
right?
You tripping.
Yeah, and if you don't set the boundary and you let it continue, it would create weirdness if in the future circumstances where you're hanging out with this person, like, and you don't set a boundary, you're just going to be weird around them.
Right. And you have to acknowledge one really key piece, which is this a pattern
Hmm.
or is this a one-off?
Yeah,
Because
that's a good
that's
point.
that's kind of like a different type of situation, because that's when like
Point.
tolerance and empathy and those types of adages come into play, because we're imperfect. We're
We're
humans.
human. It's going to
You know,
happen.
like
Hmm.
I get that you're going to like I'm going to say some shit when I'm tired and sick that I'm really like I have a good one. I have a good story I'll go into here in a
Is
minute.
this pre-coffee, Ian?
No, this is me cold with a cold, tired from a long day of work, mentally drained, pretty much burnt out, getting groceries, and someone
Mm.
wanted to try me.
Oh, at the
Yeah,
store.
yeah.
What's this looking like?
We'll just go. We'll just go to the story
Yeah,
because
we're doing it.
it's ripe.
We're
So
doing
here
it.
we're going in. We're going in. So it's dusk. So
It's the golden
I
hour, King
was
Super's parking lot.
yeah, I was at a Natural Grocers,
Okay.
which is an amazing local grocery store. This episode is sponsored by No, I'm just kidding.
Get
So
there.
I was I was at Natural Grocers, aka Vitamin Cottage, Colorado staple. It's excellent. I was in there getting some groceries, picking up some stuff for dinner and some odds and ends and stuff like crackers, because I'm really not eating anything. It's just liquids and little things because I'm not really not hungry.
It's
Because
rough.
when you have a cold, like a bad cold, you just
Rough.
like don't want to do shit. You don't want to eat.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm in there grabbing some stuff. I'm already not feeling great, and I'm just like ragged, you know. And so I'm kind of meandering around the aisles. I get all my shit. I got it in my bag. So I have like less than 12 items. I would
Hmm.
say like six items. Okay.
You're just
So
passing through.
yeah. So I walk up to the front and I realize there are two cashiers. One is sweeping. So she's not aware. She's not actually at the cashier. She's like, there are four stations. There are two cashiers and one is sweeping. And there's a line starting. There's like three people in line for the one person who's still ringing people up. And the
Hmm.
person who's sweeping, who is standing literally right next to me. So like I'm standing right in front of the first bay, right? The first
Hmm.
cashier. It's like cashier 1, 2, 3, and 4.
She's
Standing literally. And
actively not paying attention to you.
no, she is. She looks over her shoulder. She sees that her coworker's busy. And so she walks up to the cashier stand and she says, I'll take the next customer on cashier 1.
Hmm.
I'm literally standing right there. So I start unloading my bag.
Oh.
This older woman who is probably, I'd say like 68 ish, somewhere in that range. She wasn't like
Mhm.
hella old, but she wasn't like, 25. She comes up and she has her little, I don't know if she had a cart. Did she have a cart or a basket? Whatever.
Hmm.
So she comes up, I think she has a basket, and she's just mean mugging me. as I'm taking my like 6 items out of my bag. And she's like, I know you weren't the next customer. And I don't
Even
say
though you were
anything.
there the whole time.
I was literally just standing there watching this whole thing. I was sitting there for like, 40 seconds
Yeah.
watching this whole thing with my bag of stuff, assessing which lane to go in.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, I'll take the next customer over here. Had I had an entire cart of shit, I probably still would have done it. And if somebody walked up with 2 items, I would have been like, hey, dip in front. I don't like, I have a ton. Like I've done that numerous times where I'm just like, it's not, you're going to be in and out. I'm going to be a minute. So you go ahead and dip in front of me. Right. Also, if we're all just clustered and there's a clear queue and we've been there for like 10 minutes and then someone says, I'll take the next person. Yeah, the person who's in front of you who's been waiting longer, they go in the queue, right?
Yes.
It's been less than 2 minutes. Right? And it just, people all started to check out at the same time. So it's been less than 2 minutes. We're all just standing there. So I unload my 6 stuff. She had like 2 lean cuisine, like microwavable frozen dinners.
How you know you're in dire straits.
That's so she had those 2 items. And in retrospect, had I been a little bit more with it, I should have at that moment said, hey, why don't you just go ahead of me? You know what I mean? Because who the hell cares?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have a good story about it, so I care a little bit. So I should have just let her go in front of me, but I just don't say anything to her. She's like, I know you weren't the next person in line. Also, I'm wearing a beanie and my ears are plugged from congestion.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm also not really hearing so well. But I did hear very clearly what she said to me. And so I unload my like 6 items and they're scanning my stuff. I literally pay for it with my watch, pick up the bag, hit the yes button, and start packing my bag within like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And by the time I am like picking up my stuff, she's like barely like finishing ringing it up. Right. And I hit yes. She's like, do you want a receipt? I say, sure. I take the receipt. She says, have a good night. I said, you too. And I turned to her and I said, I hope that was fast enough for you. And then she starts going off at me and she's like, it's not about me. And I just turn heel and I walk away.
Yes.
And I was fucking furious.
Yeah.
Internally walking outside because I had one of 3 options. Option the first, exactly what I did, which was pretty much say nothing, but don't completely let this person who obviously just wants to be a sour pill in the world and go unchecked. Thing the first is basically just acknowledge it and just not contribute further to it, right? Thing the second, say absolutely nothing. Let her live in her sour little lonely ass lean cuisine frozen dinner life and let her just exist in that space where she has to walk around grumpy about people who just fucking check out at a grocery store, who's literally did not cut. I didn't like stiff arm her rugby style, and trip her son or something. She was by herself, but like I didn't like punch her in the face and just like take the line. I literally just was standing there. She said, next, please. And I just unloaded my shit. Yeah. So option the second is just not say anything, allow her to be better.
Yeah.
Or option the third, which proceeded to be my entire internal monologue for the next 45 minutes, was
lean cuisine eating motherfucker.
Go the fuck off on this woman. Not in a ballistic way, but in the Scorpio way of literally undermine every possible piece of opinion that she might think that she has and make her so fucking wrong that she's questioning the reality of her life. Like that is where I would have gotten to with her. Like had I chosen option 3. But what's the point of that? You know what I mean? Like there's like, is she going to change her opinion now? That I'm just like, okay, Barbara, break this down for me. How fucking many minutes were you waiting in line? How many minutes was it?
Not as long as it takes to cook a lean cuisine.
Not as long as it took me to check the fuck out in front of you. So if it's about time that you're worried about, that's completely out the window, right? Because it's not about time. It's about etiquette. as you were trying to yell at me and I was stuffy eared walking away from you and heard muffled kind of things about what you were trying to say. If it's about etiquette, where were you in that line? And what etiquette are we following? Are we following when you walked into the store? When you took a number and got in line? Or if there was a queue of a substantial number, let's say there's 15 people waiting, there were like 5. If the etiquette is to let the person who was waiting way the fuck down at the end, all the way up to the front, and to let them go first, which wasn't you, that was the other person who was the next person in line in Q4. So if we're talking about etiquette, that person technically gets to go first. So does the third, and so does the fourth. But no, we have 2 queues. So what do we do in a common modern day society where they've invented fucking lines? Is we divide, we stand there, and we take our respective turn. Now, how, Barbara, do we divide these things up so that it's equitable and fits within a code of conduct that people think is fair? Well, who was standing there first? Well, there we go. Was I standing next to fucking queue number 1 first? I believe I was, Barbara. So depending on however you want to think about this, you're going to be wrong. And you just want to be bitter because I happened to get the queue before you, and you had been waiting maybe an additional 45 fuck off seconds. And I checked out faster than you did when you're searching for your goddamn pennies in your clutch to pay for your dinner. Dude, I'm sick. I'm dealing with overpriced prices of like inflation. And you know what I really wanted to go off on her, Patrick, and really just kind of like twist the proverbial dagger
Can
in?
I guess?
Go for it.
Who goes to a natural fucking grocer's and gets a lean cuisine?
No, that is not what I was wanting. This is not what I was going to go into. But what I was going to go into was start taking it personal, meaning millennial v Gen Gen Boomer, right? So I was going to be like, all these inflated prices, you've already leveraged my entire future, Barbara.
Ooh.
Like, do you want my jacket? And start taking off my jacket. I'm like, how about my blood as well? What more can you take from me? How much more do you want to take from me when all I did was step into fucking line to pay for my overpriced groceries? You know, I was going to take it to that level.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about an economic status. So if you're talking about equal, let's talk about equal. Let's talk about how you and your generation have leveraged the futures of mine. So that way we all can work our asses to the grave for a fraction of what you've been able to live off of. When you were able to buy a house for $1.25.
College.
So it's like, holy fucking fuck sticks. Like I was just
really good point.
So it's like I'm sitting in my car just doing this. Just having this narrative. And it reminds me of back in my youth when I would get this angry regularly. And it ties back into the conversation because if I'm this fucking pissed about how the way that people are talking to me, one of 2 things is happening. I'm either not communicating well, or I'm hanging out in an environment where my boundaries are getting fucking click-clocked left and right, and I have no clear way of establishing them.
Yeah.
Because nobody should be talking to anybody like that if there's really no assault or insult happening.
No.
She was trying to check me on something where there was no need to check me on it.
It was a perceived slight.
It was a perceived slight because of her privilege of feeling like she should have been next. It's a personal thing. It's not an implicit. She was trying to make this universal thing of like etiquette, which is intrinsically unbiased. It was 100% biased. And if you're going to be setting a boundary with somebody about something, it has to be, in my opinion, of something of equal value to the point. Well, let me take a step back. There are
something of equal value.
There are 2 different types of boundaries here. There are several, I'm sure, but the 2 that I'm really wanting to, the 2 that I'm going to call out, and I'm going to pass the mic to you because I've been eating up all the airtime.
No, I love it. I needed that story. It
was rich.
It was
covered with gravy. Lean cuisine, Barbara, man. Good God. So 2 different types of boundaries, really. One is like, hey, that didn't feel great, or it's just like, hey, in the future I'd appreciate it if, right?
Mm.
You put a hand towel back the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be a huge discussion. You if you're in someone's house, they do it incorrectly for the house, they don't know shit. You say, hey, in the future, if you wouldn't mind doing X. Someone
Mm-hmm.
walks into your house, they go to your couch, they have the shoes on, they kick their shoes up on the couch.
Yep.
Hey, in the future, we're a shoes off house. If you wouldn't mind just kick them off when you come in,
Mm-hmm.
no problem.
Yep.
Right.
There's a
So
request in there.
that's boundary number one, meaning
Mm-hmm.
it's really kind of formal and it's really, or informal, and it really doesn't have a lot of high stakes.
Yeah.
Okay. Boundary number two is you really fucking hurt me. And I really feel the need to like take you aside, go for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
go downstairs, figure out some situation where we can clear this up because it is clearly not okay.
Yeah. There
And if
needs to
we
be a
don't
stop
figure it out,
and an intervention.
right? And if we don't figure it out, there's going to be real big fucking
Mm-hmm.
implications and problems
Mm-hmm.
like moving forward,
The nature
where
of the
you're not going to feel
relationship will
comfortable,
change.
or like I'm going to feel like awkward going
Mm-hmm.
to an event that you're at because we haven't cleared the shit up because you
Mm-hmm.
stepped over something on me and we haven't talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the two kind of delineating severity, I would say,
Good word.
of different types of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Is one is less severe in that, like, hey, you put a box on my chair. If you in the future couldn't do that, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big deal. And if you do it again, it's not
I'm
going to
gonna
break
burn
the
your house
friendship.
down. It's fine.
It's like if you do it again, whatever. It's not going to kill me. Two is if I don't address this with you, we probably shouldn't hang out anymore. And obviously, it's a spectrum
Mm-hmm.
because some are going to be more severe than others. But at the end of the day, they still are boundaries and they still have the same kind of intent, meaning an action happened that went against something for me personally that set off my equilibrium to make me feel uneasy. And I feel the need to address it with you to hopefully find more connection, deeper connection, common ground, and understanding and empathy. And that is, and again, it's a two-way street,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're like cohabitating with somebody.
Yeah,
You can't
definitely.
just be like, this is mine and you have to do me. It's just like, no, it's about, okay, like, well, I hear you and what you're saying. However, I can't do that fully, but I would like to do like 80% of that.
Yeah.
Is that agreeable to you? Does that feel like it meets the mark? Right.
Mm.
And it gets really nuanced. And I think really it comes back to like, can you have a good sense of self to know and delineate or differentiate and have discernment around whether or not it's something you even need to call out?
Mm-hmm.
Because in some cases it's just a preference, it's not a boundary.
Yeah.
And you're just being a little bit of a pill, trying to make everybody just dance around you.
Is that
And
another
then
word for snowflake?
a pill.
Yeah, I don't hear that every day.
No, it's something that my mom used to say. It's like, oh, you're being a pill.
Interesting.
And it's just like you're being like persnickety and just kind of snarky and just kind of like dour and just like prickly, and it's just like you're being a real pill today.
Okay. I hear you.
Yeah. So it's just like you're not playing nice,
You're not playing nice.
But yeah, I wanted to turn it over to you. So how does all of that register? What do you want to talk about in regards to all of that and or whatever?
I mean, I just love hearing you distinguish between the different types of boundaries, because I think growing up, there was just no instruction on how to set healthy boundaries for myself. And if I'm really being honest, I don't think my mom had healthy boundaries either. So it just wasn't modeled very well.
Sure.
And I feel like my dad probably would have excellent, pretty straightforward boundaries, but I didn't spend enough regular time with him to get that through osmosis, that instruction through osmosis. And I'm just appreciating the languaging that you're using, because I think in my mind, what can phase me out of setting a boundary in the moment, or even just saying something, is not knowing that there are grades to this, like you just described, like, hey, would really love it if in the future you could just make sure to fold your laundry after you do it. That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Versus like, yo, like getting to that point where I'm angry because I didn't say something sooner and my anger is out
Mhm.
of proportion to the
Yep.
instant
Yeah.
infraction that's happening.
Yes. Yes. You're
Yeah.
basically calling out a boundary on something that really is not that big of a deal.
Right. And it's
And
my fault for not
unfortunately,
saying it sooner.
well, no, 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 no. I mean, kind of, but really, what it comes down to is things will snowball,
Hmm.
and they'll build to a point internally for you. The proportion is accurate.
Hmm.
But what you're experiencing and what you're expressing is that it gets to a point where you have to say it loud and you have to say it big
Yeah.
because the little person in you doesn't feel heard and
Yeah.
doesn't feel seen and understood.
Hmm.
And the only way that you know how to be heard and seen is to be big and loud.
Is to get big and loud. Yeah.
Um,
And I wasn't
and
allowed to be like to express that kind of big energy when I was a little boy, like because my growing up with my mom, she would always say like, "Oh, it's super scary when men get angry," and if,
Mhm.
obviously, like, yeah, it is
Yeah,
totally.
yeah,
But as a little boy, I really took that in,
yeah,
So I
yeah. And you don't want to be
really
scary. Yeah, you don't want to be
no,
scary,
no,
but you
totally
want to.
repressed angry feels all
Right.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
time.
So there's like
Yep,
repression kind of like mixed up in there. And that happens for
yep,
sure for like a ton of people.
yeah,
And yeah, the idea of being able to really throttle the response to meet kind of what's happening. And I think that when we're people who are less practiced with setting boundaries, it is really fucking messy.
yeah,
It is messy. And you have to, if you're the person who's helping someone with uh unpracticed boundaries, is you have to take kind of a step back from when they're setting them
mm,
to recognize that there don't the intensity is unnecessary
mm-hmm,
for the instance,
mm-hmm,
but they're learning about how to throttle it,
yeah. I love
you know.
that
And
word,
so
throttle.
yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
really is what it is kind of like
yeah,
you kind of turn it in nuance. It's all just a nuance of how you respond to it, and also and you learn how to play it like an instrument
mhm.
ultimately.
I
Because
really thought you were gonna say fiddle. I
yeah, or
really,
like a
really
fiddle.
thought that
Yeah,
was gonna be the
instrument
thing.
fiddle, that's right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
You learn to play it like an instrument because it is something that you, with practice, learn that I don't have to do that to get my needs met.
Mm,
And when you're so used to not being overstepped or overshadowed or yelled over, it's that classic scene in a movie where the quiet girl who's just been talked over the entire fucking movie or whatever, and they're talking shit about her like Cinderella or something,
mhm.
right? And they're just doing that right in front of her, and she's like, "Fucking enough!" And it's like at this big party, and everyone's like, "Whoa, what's
Yeah,
wrong with the crazy chick?"
yep.
You know, and it's because it bubbles to that point
Mhm.
where it's like, I have tried, I've tried,
Dude.
or I haven't, and I haven't had the fucking gumption to say it, but now I do because I'm pissed enough, or now I do because I'm sad enough, or whatever. And you have to learn how to recognize those cues earlier
Yeah,
before they get
exactly,
so cattywampus that they throw you
exactly.
into such a dysregulated state. So I think you had it right on. You had the hit the nail right on the head
I
in
mean, like
that.
you said, it's the small things,
Mhm.
the little ones that I want to take more charge of, and like listening to like, hey, that didn't feel right. Can you clarify what you meant by that? Like
Isn't that a
those are the
fucking sweet like
I think those are the
victory
ones for
card?
me. Yeah, the
Yeah,
little
that's
ones.
it's like that is like the plus one Uno card or whatever. Like it's like just the magic card to pull out and say
Mhm,
that because it applies in like every single one of those situations
mhm.
that you feel like stung by something and you're like, I didn't like that. Could you try that a different way?
Yeah,
Like I'm not hearing it that way. So if you could try another way, that'd be great.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I have to I'll send you that video when I find it.
Please,
Because there's
please.
three of them. It just like negates conflict dead in its tracks.
I
Because when
like that.
someone wants to have conflict with you and you're like, I'm not here for that. I'm here for restorative, like I'm
Mhm.
here for solutions. I'm very rarely interested in having conversations where people just yell at each other.
Yeah, where it devolves. I really like the example that we're speaking to though, because it is asking for deeper ownership and clarity on both people in the interaction. So
Mhm.
for the person who is saying, "Hey, I don't know what you meant by that, and what you said didn't really land well. Can you clarify what you were saying?" I'm like owning the fact that it didn't feel well and that I want to know more deeply what was meant. And then on the part of the other person, it's like, "Whoa, what did I really mean when I said that?" You know?
It gives people a time to reflect on stuff that they're often just unconsciously doing.
Yeah.
And bringing that consciousness to it oftentimes will change that person's perspective on
Yeah.
what it was that they were even saying. Like, shit, that's not what I meant. Like that's not what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Those are the wrong words for what I was actually conveying.
Yeah.
You know, and there are patterns
Mhm.
around setting up these things and also recognizing the pattern, recognizing it as a pattern, like my friend who recognized that it was the second time back to back, 2 times in a row. So he's like, I'm just going to call this out.
Yeah.
Because the first time he didn't say anything. He was happy to see me, running late. I
Mhm.
texted, no problem. Second time, back to back. All right, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's something that's a consistent issue, and this is for not just you, I'm talking to like everybody, right? If it's something that it's a consistent issue for you, then you have to look at the common denominators. You are obviously the common denominator in your life. And is everyone treating you that way, right? Or
Mhm.
is it a very one person specific, or is it a you thing
Point.
specific?
That's a good point.
And if it's a one person specific, then that's a really good indicator that the boundary needs to be set.
Yeah.
Because if everyone is reacting to you in the same way, probably it's you that needs to adjust,
Mhm.
whether it's with expectations or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but if it's just one or two people, oftentimes that's a pretty good indicator of, okay, I probably should talk to them about it. And the ickiness that you feel is valid. I really want to make that really clear to everybody who's feeling things or
Mhm.
struggles to feel things, is that when you hear something and it feels like you got gut punched, that's valid. Even if
Yeah.
that person didn't mean to hurt you, your
Right.
stomach still hurts,
Yeah.
you
That's a
know?
super great point, Ian, because then it would, if I were to be the person that's like, "Hey, that didn't land well. Can you try saying that a different way?" It like you said, it encourages much deeper connection potential because the other person would it would behoove them to employ some tact and instead of just throw around, willy-nilly their words and step on you, and even if they don't mean to, it just encourages more nuance and skill in
Yeah, and
interacting,
or
and that's good
changing
for
changing
everybody.
how they want to phrase it. And like I'm not
Yeah.
saying don't talk to me about those things. I'm just saying if you could talk to me about them in this way, I would be way more receptive to hearing you.
Mm,
But I felt when you said it like that you were being da 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 da, and I didn't like that.
I hate da-da-da.
Because hey na na na. So yeah, it's something. Obviously, it's nuanced. Obviously, it takes practice. Obviously, it's something that you're not going to get overnight, especially if you're new to the game. And unfortunately, a lot of adults are. They don't know how to establish healthy boundaries. They're
I
either used to
appreciate you
being a
saying that
doormat.
'cause sometimes I feel a little cuckoo for just not
Yeah,
knowing this.
it's true. There's a lot of people, man. Like I take for granted those types of soft skills that I have
Mhm.
because I've just been so inundated in that world for so long and surround myself with so many really smart fucking people in that way,
Yeah,
like really practiced and
you
educated.
do.
So it's helpful when you are like playing amongst
Yes.
pros
On that
because it
note,
sharpens your game, and then you go into contact with muggles and you're like, "Wait, where's your magic?"
I love that. I
You
wanna
know?
ask you, a closing question in speaking from the people who did not grow up with those soft skills, who feel like, "Man, I'm learning how permeable I am, and I need to freaking learn how to set some healthy boundaries, but don't know where to start." Where might you point people as, like, starting resources to start exploring those skills?
Oh, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, therapy is a great one.
Yeah, that is a really
Um,
yeah.
because everyone, there's a stigma against therapy. Like, you have to be crazy. Everyone can
Right.
benefit from therapy. 100% of people.
Amen.
I guarantee there's some stuff under the covers that you have just been leaving dormant,
Hmm.
unprocessed, and
It's
all
never
that
been
negative stuff
reflected
is
to
just,
you
yeah,
directly.
is just weighing you down. So it's good. It's a good practice to just kind of go clean the closet occasionally. And then once you get some tools, it's easier to do kind of like with yourself or with people. For men's groups are great.
Hmm.
You'll learn a lot of really good methodologies towards communication and different styles of holding space for people.
Hmm.
And boundaries are often tested in those types of environments
True.
because you're talking about really heavy shit, and
Yep.
a lot of people get legit triggered. And you have to learn how to practice that stuff in real time
Yeah.
with a bunch of committed men
In a
who
highly structured
who are
format.
all there for the same thing. So
Yeah.
there's like, you get to really practice in the trenches, so to speak. And that's where I
Hmm.
feel I cut a lot of my teeth, so to speak, on that,
Yeah.
in that front, is like all the work I've done in like men's work.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure there are books and blogs and all the things out there about like
Yeah.
how to set boundaries. But
The
um,
experience is
yeah, it's
key,
it's
right?
about really checking in with yourself and really asking yourself, is in those moments when when you feel that, if you can catch it, how could you choose to respond differently? Because I think the hesitation for you, you said the
Hmm.
hesitation was, I missed the cue.
Hmm.
Like, why don't you? Because I
Yeah.
missed the cue. I would say that oftentimes what happens too for people, um, in that environment, is they don't want to cause conflict. Is it's less about not acknowledging that that fucking hurt.
Yep.
But if I say that now, this drive to the grocery store is going to
Hmm.
be a fucking fight instead of just driving to the grocery store. I could either
Yeah.
choose to let it go
Hmm.
or I can call it out. And what I found is that by calling it out with the high stakes relationships that you have,
Hmm.
if they're healthy, uh, everyone wants to know when they are acting out of unconsciousness or
I
doing
would want
something
to know.
harmful. They want
Yeah.
to know. They want to
Yeah.
know. If I break something, I want to know that you broke it. I don't have to hide it like a
100%.
kid. I don't have to hide it like a 5-year-old who breaks a vase and tries to sweep it under the rug or whatever. Like, no one's trying to parent anybody like in those types of relationships,
Mhm.
and setting boundaries with parents and kids. That's a whole
Yeah.
dynamic
A
too.
whole specific container.
But the idea is like, I need to know that this is an issue. Otherwise I can't change. And you're
Robbing them of
holding
the
me
opportunity.
hostage. Yeah. You're not giving me the opportunity to show up differently for you.
Yeah.
And so I would clap back at that idea of like, I don't want to cause conflict, or I don't want to make
Mhm.
them upset, or I don't want to do that. You'd actually be making them more upset by not bringing it up, because then when
Yeah.
you bring it up way the fuck later, it's not even fresh. It's not even relevant anymore. And then now you're trying to like hash up this dead thing.
Or let it
And
fester and just don't hang out with that person anymore, and they're just left wondering what happened or
yeah,
something. Different
yep.
ways that these things can unfold negatively.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. How about you, Patrick? Any closing thoughts
Well, I
around?
love that you pulled that out of the fate jar. Because I mean, I hope this was as valuable to everyone listening as it was for me, because even just bringing language to it and knowing that there is like a safe, it's not always going to like it's going to get messy from time to time. It just right. And just knowing that that's how it is, but it's much healthier and more conducive to connection to bring up when you're feeling something inside that needs to be presented for the sake of the relationship, whatever that relationship may be. It's a bid for connection more than it is a door slamming, and just
And it
reframing
doesn't
it that
have to
way,
be,
powerful.
yeah, yeah, and it doesn't have to be huge every time.
No.
I think that's the eye roll, and that's even me, who's like really well versed in this stuff, where like I'll say something and be like, "Oh, can we have this like deep 30-hour conversation?" I'm like, "Oh my god, no!" Like, how do I not have this conversation? What action do I need to do? Is it putting the spoons from the left to the right? I will do whatever it is to not have this conversation, because it's about putting spoons away.
Uh-huh.
I don't need to have a 3-hour heart to heart about putting fucking spoons away. You know what I mean? So like there's also part of it where if someone's really that upset about how you put spoons away, one of two things is happening. It's either one, they are hella controlling and they don't know how to voice
Mhm.
anything other than that level of severity of intensity of talking about everything. Or they lack that kind of like that nuance and understanding. They're either new at it and they're practicing.
Mhm.
You need to put the spoons to the, you know, like, and just get super frustrated and angry about putting spoons away.
Hey,
And you're like, okay, geez, let's
you know
talk
what's
about
really
spoons.
frustrating to me? You know what really grinds my gears?
What grinds your
Not
gears?
having a stack of lean cuisines in my freezer right now.
Pop in the toaster oven whenever you're ready. That's so funny. Yeah, I would say practice with your people. You know,
Mhm.
everybody out there, like take some moments and really like lean into the quote unquote
Start
discomfort.
small. That's what I'm
You know,
finding.
you can
So
start
for
small,
everyone.
sure.
Yeah.
I would say like practice whenever it's available
Yeah.
because you'll find yourself with lots of mini moments and to recognize and to have the level of discernment to recognize when it's not a big deal
Yeah. The tolerance
and
piece.
tolerance and just empathy.
Yeah.
Someone takes a cart in front of you, it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
You know, if someone cuts in front of you in line and you talk to them about it and they freak out on you, it's not a big
Just be
deal.
bigger.
You
Yep.
know, just yeah, just there's it's there's certain things that are worth kind of going. That's kind of the piece that I was trying to get to. There are certain things to go to the mattresses for, right?
Mm.
There's certain conversations where I need to pull you aside and we need to talk.
You were
Like
bringing up just like these deep cuts, like you're a pill, going to the mattresses. Like I'm learning so much tonight.
going to battle. So there are certain things to go to battle for, right? Like there's certain conversations and certain instances where some shit was said and like, all right, we need to talk about that.
Mhm.
You know, that
Mhm.
interaction right there, no, no, no,
Mhm.
no, no. And especially if it's a pattern. But if it's a one off or if it's a minimal thing and it's really not that big of a deal, you can either call it out and be like, hey, can you actually put the dishes on the left instead of the right? That'd be great. Thanks. Chill. But you can just see like the kind of the casualness of the request.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, hey, let's go have tea. I have this thing I need to talk to you about. When you were undoing the dishes last night, you put them on the right instead of the left. And I woke up this morning and it really set me off. And I'm like, why the fuck did we drive and pay for parking to have this conversation?
I love that point though, keeping it casual when that's appropriate, because it doesn't always have to be a blow up big
It also
deal.
mitigates the fear of the
Yeah.
confrontation, you know, because it doesn't have to be this huge blowout thing
No.
over everything. You know, if
No.
like, so I'd say say somebody I'm dealing with is like being hypercritical of me regularly. And they're just like, hey, your shoes are untied. Hey, your hair looks messy. Hey, you look really old today.
Damn.
Did you sleep okay? You know, let's say I'm dealing with somebody like that who's like constantly hypercritical of me. Do I have to get loud and punch them in the sternum so they don't breathe right for the rest of their life?
Kind
Or,
of.
or do I have to be like, hey, don't really appreciate those comments. And if you don't want to say something like nice or whatever, it's just like if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all kind of
Mhm.
mentality. And so I can make that request. And if they want to be an asshole, then now for sure they're an asshole,
Yeah.
right?
Then you know.
Maybe they were just being, maybe they're like hella neurodivergent and they're just like, just calling out shit that they see. It's
Mhm.
like when kids run up and they give you a hug and they're like, you smell weird. And then they just run off. It's like, they don't have any malice in their heart at all. They just like, you know, you were driving all day and your armpits smell and you give them a big hug and they're like, you smell weird and just like dip out. And it's just like, it's really just plain of fact,
Uh-huh.
you know? So that's why that question of like, hey, I didn't really like that. Could you tell me more about what you meant?
I'm putting
Or
that in the
like,
back pocket.
you know, is a great one because oftentimes it is like, hey, you just smell and it's really just implicit, but you like, oh man, now I feel like a stinky old badger. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell?
Hey,
You know?
don't talk shit about my Hufflepuff badger.
I
I'm
know.
watching you.
I see you.
I'm
I see
watching
these
you.
little digs you're getting in, and I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, if you could just try to find another way to say that, that would be great. Thanks. Boom. We did it, Ian.
We did it. We just
We
practiced what we
brought we
preached.
brought fate back to the parched deserts,
Earth of Middle
parched
Earth.
earth, and we I made it work up in the studio. I'll figure out different lighting and fun background.
Honestly, it ain't bad.
Yeah.
It's
Keep on
better than
moving.
like half of our other casts where you're just like in shadow.
Right? Breathed in shadow and flame over here. Jesus.
So yeah. No, it was excellent cast. Loved
Yes.
it.
Beautiful
Juicy,
conversation.
juicy topic. Definitely encourage everybody to go practice. And
Yeah.
love to hear what your thoughts are. If you have any
Yeah.
comments or
What
questions
are people
or
learning
anything,
out in
we'd
the
love to hear
field?
from you. Yeah, let us know.
Yeah. And we would love to get just another, like, really, I loved how on the ground this topic was,
Mm,
you know, like so relevant to the day-to-day human experience. I mean, don't get me
mm.
wrong, I love getting into the nature of God with you,
Yeah,
but something really
yeah,
landed about this cast for me. And I
for sure.
really sincerely hope that it does for other people too.
I agree. No, that was excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Ian. I love you.
Appreciate all the listeners tuning in, checking us out. We appreciate each and every one of you 17 people. Or maybe we'll get 20. Maybe we'll
Yep.
get 60 like our first one this time. Who knows? Maybe people will share it because they got a lot of value from it. I don't know.
Dude, we're sending lean cuisines to our 17 subscribers for sure.
I love it. Awesome. Well, on that note, thanks everybody. Thanks for checking this out.
Thank you, everyone. See you next
Yeah.
time.
Next time.